was kind of a wild process. I'm just like, wow, all the rules of the creative process are totally different right now.
That's the most important theme of this, that literally artificial intelligence and the tools that you've used unleash your creative power, unleash your creative potential. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Through Conversations podcast. I am joined by no other than Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. He's a previous guest. He was one of the first guests on the show. So, Seth, thank you so much for joining me again.
Do you say every guest is a very special guest?
Most of my guests are very special because they're special to me, but it's like each one has a tiny piece of my heart. So yes, I do say to most of them. but it still
made me feel good. It is amazing that even compliments that are just said to everybody still make people feel good. So I feel very honored that I'm a special guest. Even
you
if
are.
everybody
I mean, the podcast is still less than 100 episodes, so I mean each one has a piece of my heart. So it still means something. But now I'm gonna have to change it thanks to this.
Because I called you out on it.
You called me out on it. But thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited because as a fellow upcoming author, I'm witnessing magic from your end. I just witnessed that you literally wrote a book in less than 30 days with the help of AI. Mm-hmm. You're doing something that's really beyond comprehension, especially I guess that for you too, because I want to let you talk, but I'm excited for you. Your previous book was written in 3 years almost. So talk to me about this new endeavor that you went on. Who makes the NBA, this new book about basketball, the hidden sauce of basketball, the secrets, all of this.
Yeah, sure. So I think about August this year, I became obsessed with this new tool, Code Interpreter. It was called Code Interpreter. Now it's called Data Analysis. It's from ChatGPT. And you just talk to it, and it does all your data analysis for you. So you just say, like, merge these data sets, make a graph, change how the graph looks, change the colors, save the data set, save the chart, and clean the data set. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And things that used to take me 3 months were now taking me 3 hours. So I kind of did some calculation, some back of the envelope calculation in my head. And I said, I bet you I could write a good book now in 30 days. And I'm kind of like, so I challenged myself. I'm like, how good a book can I write in 30 days? And I chose the MBA for a variety of reasons. Some of them related to how AI works. AI right now, Code Interpreter or data analysis, you can only use it for kind of pretty small data sets. So you can't use it for 100,000 observations. In the NBA, there have only been 4,500 NBA players in history. So the data sets tend to be reasonably small. I couldn't do this for the stock market necessarily, because the data sets would be too big. And but also I'm a big basketball fan. So I wrote this book and it was so fun. It's another thing about AI is so I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I think it turned out way better than I was expecting, but also it was like the most fun I've ever had working. Because something about like AI for me just eliminates all the parts of my job or my work process that I hate. So I hate cleaning data sets, merging data sets. Generally coding I've never liked. And it does all that for you. And it kind of frees you to just be creative and ask the questions and focus on the things that I actually love doing, or tinkering. So like I could spend a whole day like getting a chart exactly right, like how to present the information. And that's like a pleasurable use of a day. So it was really fun. I'm really happy with how it turned out. So it was kind of a wild process. I'm just like, wow, all the rules of the creative process are totally different right now.
That's the most important theme of this, that literally artificial intelligence and the tools that you've used unleash your creative power, unleash your creative potential. And that's a big theme that I want to discuss with you today, Seth, that, we'll discuss also the book in itself, but this is revolutionary for someone who's written best-selling books like you have. You've literally transformed your own recipe of how a book should be written, and that's for me a mind-blowing. So can you talk to me about this change in how you see writing books, and what does this mean for your future books themselves?
Yeah, well, I'm like, I think I could write 100 more books. If this one took basically 30 days, you know, there are little complications. I had already done some of the research beforehand, you know, but I think clearly a shockingly short period of time, like, I'm like, I could write 100 more books, but I mean, also, we didn't even get into, if you saw I think I sent you a copy of the book. There's also just a ton of art in the book. And like, I have zero artistic talent, but I have artistic ideas. I have creativity, but you know, I've never even tried art because I have no ability to express it. I can't, you know, you tell me to draw a horse, it will look nothing like a horse. And, you know, so I've never even dreamed of having art in a book. And, you know, to hire an artist can be pretty expensive and time consuming. You know, and I don't really have a huge budget to write my books. But now with Midjourney and DALL-E, you know, every chapter starts with a piece of art. So, you know, I have one of my chapters is about how I think the best potential basketball player in the world is probably working as a rice farmer in India right now. Yeah. So I just made asked Midjourney draw LeBron James working as a rice farmer in India. And it looks exactly like LeBron James working as a rice farmer in India. It was amazing. I have one with Warren Buffett. I have a chapter where I talk about Warren Buffett a little bit. So I have Warren Buffett playing basketball. Like, it's just, one chapter on genetics, how genetic basketball is. I have a piece of DNA dribbling a basketball between its legs. Like, it's just so wild to unleash your creativity in that way, where, you know, I do have ideas. Like, I do feel like I have artistic creativity in the sense that, you know, what's a good piece of art for a chapter on genetics of how genetic basketball is? Oh, a piece of DNA playing basketball. But I have no artistic talent, so that creativity just dies, or would have died before, but now it can be expressed using these AI tools.
Yeah, that's amazing, because like you say, you had it in you, like, and this is a big theme on Who Makes the NBA, is that there's this potential, and how do we untap that potential? And especially for us who are trying to write books and being creatives, that loophole that you had in your previous books, I remember Everybody Lies, it didn't have art, it had graphs, and now what you have is LeBron, like you say, picking up rice in a farm, which I promise you we'll get to those questions, because I have questions on LeBron James, on the potential LeBron James in India, the genetics of the basketball sport and sports altogether as a whole. But I would like to dig deeper into, you know, how you've managed to write a book in, you say, statistically less than 720th the time. So 1 in 720. You're the numbers guy, so I'm saying it wrong. But Seth, the question here is, so this is day one of writing your book, and how are you training yourself to explore these new AI tools, Midjourney, DALL-E? Like, for a new author who's about to begin on a journey of writing a book with AI, how are you using all of these tools, ChatGPT and the rest?
So I have tips in the end of my book where I say best use cases. So one thing I want to clarify is I did not use ChatGPT very frequently to write the content. I didn't just say, you know, write this chapter, this is what I want, because I kind of found that ChatGPT is a B writer or B plus writer, and I would like to think that I'm an A writer, A plus writer. I can dream, but you know, it's important for me that I have my voice and I'm not cliched. And you know, ChatGPT tends to be very cliched and flowery, in my opinion, and so I didn't use it to write. I did it more for the data analysis and then the art. And I have tips in the back where things I learned the hard way. I mean, there's some subtle things like ChatGPT, if you data analysis tool, if you use it too much in a short period of time, it puts you on what I call timeout. It says you can't use this ChatGPT Plus for the next 2 hours or whatever. And once you do that, it tends to lose everything, forget everything that you've been using. So it's really important when you're getting close to timeout, which you kind of figure out over time, to save all your work, to be like, give me all the code so so that I can start right where I am right now. So there are all these things you learn over time, or I learned the hard way. I learned that from just losing a lot of my code and having to start from scratch and being like, this is so frustrating. And, so I hopefully to save, if people are going to try this, I have a whole section, 20 pages or so where I say, these are the things I learned that, and the mistakes I made that can save you a lot of time. But another thing is just playing around with the tool and, just you learn over time. You kind of have an instinct of where it's likely to make mistakes, where it's likely to get, where you have to double check things and triple check things, and where you can kind of be confident that it's going to get it right, over time. And you just learn things. Another thing with the art piece that I learned is that you want to take advantage of, there are a lot of studies in art that quantity leads to quality. Kind of the more work you make, the more likely you are to have a hit. And with Midjourney or Dali, quantity is trivial, so you want to really take advantage of that. So the piece of art I have in the book, I think people might not realize, I probably created 100 versions of each one to get to that one, which I think is the best one. So it's not like I just say, draw LeBron James as a rice farmer in India, and that's the first one that came up, and it's perfect. Right. I just, I keep on, redoing it, give me more until you get to the point where you're like, okay, that's the best one. And that's the tricks like that you learn over time, to really take advantage of AI. I think, one of the other reasons I wanted to write this book is I felt like I'd learn a lot about these tools in writing it. So, and I feel like I have. And what I'd recommend for other people who want to use these tools is do something similar, where spend 30 days, even if you're not writing a book, just playing around with the tools and learning how they work and learning best practices. And you'll learn so much. Now I feel like I really understand how to best use these tools in ways I would have never understood when I started.
Wow. And so, Seth, does that mean, just to drill down on that point, because I think that's really important, is, so in a broader scale, you believe that these tools, AI is really here to stay, and like all of us should really embrace it. And the way to do it is, if I understand correctly, is for you it was trying to explore your own creativity. It was trying to explore your own interests, and in that way, paradoxically, you knew about the tools themselves, to learn about them. So do you believe that everyone should be trying to explore these tools, like, for good?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people deep in the AI field say that AI right now is the worst version of AI we'll ever have. And it still allowed me to write a book in 1/720th of the time that I had previously taken to write books. So it seems crazy to me not to be learning these tools, taking advantage of these tools. Like, if, making use of these tools, especially if you do some coding, you do some writing, and I think just also the possibility to do things that you never dreamed of doing, like having art in a book. Like, I just assumed, okay, well, I'm not an artist, so my books are never going to have art. Like, I would have never imagined that a book of mine would have, art that a lot of people are telling me looks really good. I've also been attacked on Twitter. A lot of people don't like the fact that AI tools are putting real artists out of business. I don't think I'm replacing any artists in my book process, because I didn't have the budget ever to hire an artist. But that's something we have to think of as a society. What does it mean when, so many people have devoted their lives to being artists, and now AI can create, in some ways, better art, in many cases, or certainly a lot cheaper art. What does that mean? And those are questions I don't really wrestle with in the book, but they're important questions. But one of the things I'm definitely happiest about in this project is that I learned so much about these tools that I feel like now anything I can do, I kind of have an understanding of how I can use AI to dramatically improve my workflow. And knowing that these tools are only getting better, kind of staying ahead of the curve, I think, on these tools is really wise, almost no matter what you're doing, because it's hard to imagine an area that isn't going to be transformed by AI in the coming 5 years, 3 years, 1 year. It's crazy that ChatGPT just came out 1 year ago.
Yeah. No, it's insane. And now that with the release of Gemini from Google, that we just saw that it can identify any image, anything that you just show it. It's insane. And like you say, it blows my mind that it's literally we're in the primitive ages of AI, and you wrote a book in 30 days. And I think that I would, personally speaking, because I'm writing a book myself, and it's wrestling with some of the questions that you just discussed on Seth, on this thin line, because you just mentioned that you received some backlash in publishing AI art, and so I'm concerned personally, and I would love to hear your own thoughts on it. But this line between, will AI unleash the potential of creativity for all of us, or will it drive people out of work? And how do we, for you personally, because you didn't expand on it, how do you see this equation playing out?
I need to think more about it. I have an economics background, and economists, we always love when the pie gets bigger. And we're like, well, the pie gets bigger, we can just give a piece of the pie. If the pie gets bigger, you just give a little bit of the pie to everybody, and there's a way to make everybody better off. It's called Pareto optimal solution. So free trade's a great example of this. So economists for a while have been very pro free trade, and the idea is that if you allow countries to specialize in what they're good at and trade with each other, kind of the GDP of the world gets a lot bigger. And economists have always been like, well, then you just, give some of that GDP to the manufacturers in America who've been put out of work, and everybody's better off. And it turns out that giving that part of the GDP to manufacturers in America never happens. So there always are people whose livelihoods are destroyed by free trade, and are really angry and hurt by the opening up of trade. And so kind of the economists might have an idea that, okay, well, if AI is going to increase productivity by 10x of society, then there's so much more to go around that artists, everybody who's hurt could be compensated by all the extra pie that we have as a society. But is that actually going to happen, or are artists just going to go out of work, or copy editors? In my book, my previous books, I had copy editors, and they went over every line and caught a ton of mistakes. This book, I used ChatGPT as a copy editor, and I'm pretty sure it caught all the errors. It's amazing at copy editing. Even like things that a human would never notice, like you have 3 spaces instead of 2 spaces, or really subtle things. ChatGPT is just amazing at copy editing. I would venture to guess that I have fewer typos in this book than in any of my previous 2 books, even though I didn't use a professional copywriter. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty confident because I tested ChatGPT. I'm like, you give it tests, like I just write up typos, and even tough typos to find, typos that'd be hard for a human to find. The first line of Everybody Lies had a typo in it. I just use the same word in twice or something, like in 2 parts of the sentence, and people just kind of naturally ignore that and find it hard to find. ChatGPT would never miss something like that. And but what does that mean? Copywriters have trained their entire lives to be really diligent at finding these errors, and now ChatGPT can do it no problem. And it's true for so many jobs. I don't know. It's wild. There aren't easy answers here. I don't think the answer is just ban this technology or not use this technology, but I don't know what the answers are, because it's also, they're coming for so many fields that people have trained so hard in, and creative fields, and it used to be, the idea was that you train a creative field, you don't have to worry about automation or And now if anything, the creative fields are more vulnerable to ChatGPT than the non-creative fields. It turns out it's easier to get AI to write incredible art than it is to create incredible art than it is to drive a truck, which I think surprises a lot of people. Or,
Wow.
do dishes. Doing dishes is, the dishwashers may be safer than artists from AI for a little bit, for a long while.
Wow, that's insane. That the table just turned, and again, like, it has its benefits, and of course, with benefits come some costs too. But I think you're hinting. Said we spoke about this before recording. Pretty much day one when you started writing your book, Who Makes the MBA, is that perhaps this is hinting towards creating a new system based on universal basic income or something like that. So in the real world, for you as an economist and as a data analyst, is that a feasibility now that you've witnessed what it can do for you while you write your books?
Yeah, definitely. I've long been a proponent of universal basic income. So this, if anything, makes me support that even more, because it does feel like, copy editing. I don't know how a copy editor is going to we're going to have any need for a copy editor. I was blown away by how good ChatGPT is. That is like a perfect use case of ChatGPT. It just finds all the mistakes in ways that copy editors would even struggle to find. So I don't really, see necessarily a use case for copy editing, human copy editors going forward. So I think we're going to need definitely universal basic income and other things, but to support people. It's happening so fast and in so many fields.
Wow. And I think we're gonna segue now into Who Makes the MBA. Just, I think, one more question, which also relates to my current situation, which I think it's going to be very useful for me and for listeners who might want to embark, might be scared to embark on their own journey as authors. It's this change in the game of publishing a book, Seth. So while it was published in 30 days, you didn't really go into the route of traditional publishing. You chose to self-publish. And so can you walk me through that process, and how did it change now that you've had both the experiences, because you've been a best-selling book in traditional publishing, and now you're embarking on, maybe I dare to say, Seth, maybe your next 100 books more will be on a self-publishing basis. So can you walk me through that?
Yeah, well, initially I thought I'd publish it with a traditional publisher, but I have a great book agent, Eric, and I talked to him, and he was kind of getting feelers, and there seemed to be a lot of confusion and not a lot of excitement for this project. And that, I think, the publishing industry, even before AI, the publishing industry has moved very, very slow. It takes forever to get a book out, and they're not really, it's not really meant to put a book out in 30 days. So I kind of realized this isn't necessarily a book that can go through the traditional publishers. It wouldn't be out in 30 days if I used a traditional publisher. So I decided to publish it myself. That has pluses and minuses. I'm already seeing some of the minuses. I think it is probably a little harder to get attention for your book. Usually when I was traditionally published, HarperCollins their PR team would send out, feelers to CBS This Morning, a lot of the big TV shows in the United States. And, I got on a lot of those shows, and now I'm kind of just sending it out on my own. It's harder for people to take me seriously as a self-published author. So it's definitely, we'll see. I'm still so early in this process, in that the book's coming out in a couple of days, and I don't know how it's going to go, how the promotion is going to go. So I don't know kind of what to think. It just would have been impossible to do it at this speed with the traditional publisher. So that was kind of the reason that I went on my own. There was no way it was going to come out in the time frame I wanted to come out if I used a traditional publisher, and I wanted to make the case that it could come out so quickly. But so we'll see. It's there are times where I'm like, maybe I should slow down and kind of publish this again with a traditional publisher, because I think the content is also really interesting. So, like the content forget the AI dimension. I think just the content of who makes the NBA and some of the studies I did or studies I referred to. Like, I think you don't really need necessarily the AI component. So, maybe down the road, I'll try to re-release it with a traditional publisher just as a standalone book or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I agree. We'll get into the contents of who makes the NBA just now. And I think that, from my perspective, the difference between, the self-publishing route and the traditional publishing route is that, there's I've hosted Paul Millard. He also decided to do a self-publishing route. And what he talks about is that self-publishers tend to, his philosophy is that they should focus more on the long-term route than the launch day. And so perhaps that for you is going to happen that, with Who Makes the NBA, it's just going to gradually take pace, grab momentum, and then all of a sudden just go exponentially upwards, rather than just launch day being just from day one like this. But we'll see. I'm excited to see.
That's definitely good advice. I think, books in general, whether you're self-published or, traditionally published, it's so hard. It's really a power law. There's some books, Sapiens, that sell, 10 million copies, but that's so rare. It's, one in I think there are probably millions of books published now, like per year or something. I forget what the stat is, but some enormous amount. And I think I was a little bit spoiled because my first book, Everybody Lies, it just hit the zeitgeist, in a rare way. It was, and I just, everybody wanted to buy it. Everybody wanted me on their shows. We met, I think, in Mexico, right? I was flown down to Mexico to give talks. I was flown all around the world. And there's a part of me that's just like, that's what happens when you put out a book in the world. Like, everybody wants to read it. Everybody wants to have you talk. Everyone wants you on their shows and their podcasts. And, my second book, Don't Trust Your Gut, if Everybody Lies got 100 on attention, Don't Trust Your Gut got probably like 50. And now I don't know what's going to happen with Who Makes the NBA, but, I think, I maybe got a little bit spoiled by my first book because, even with a traditional publisher, that's not really to be expected. There's a friend of mine in the writing business said, how should you think of the time before your book comes out? You should think of it as the calm before the calm. Instead of the calm before the storm, the calm before the calm. Because, usually your book comes out and there's not much of a storm. There's a lot of calm. Nobody really notices. It's very hard to get both attention for a book and I think people to purchase your book. Even when I was promoting this book, I've been promoting this book a lot on Twitter, and a couple of my tweets went viral. One tweet got 1.1 million views, and I had a link to my book under the tweet. I'm like, 1.1 million people are going to see this tweet. This is like gold for selling my book. And I think of those 1.1 million, like 5 people purchased my book or something. So like, it's very hard to get people to buy a book, in general. And unless your book kind of just totally captures the zeitgeist, like a Sapiens. Everybody Lies had a little bit of that phenomenon where it had great word of mouth and, people were just so excited about it that I think, again, I forget that, that's the exception and not to be expected when you're writing a book, self-published or not, or published.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. This is my last question regarding this side of the equation. Well, my second to last question, Seth. I'm sorry, but I'm very curious to exploring this part of your book, What Makes the NBA. All of these sides of the equation on doing it by yourself. How did it change for you? How was it? Because I was paying close attention to your play-by-play basis on sharing it through social media, through Twitter especially, like your progress. And how did it influence your writing process? And, what are the benefits of like just publishing as you go, like sharing your progress with your audience? Yeah,
so I tweeted out most of my studies on Twitter. And the reason for that was because I'm self-publishing it, I'm not getting a lot of feedback. So my dad and my mom read every word of the book. My girlfriend read a lot of it. She's not a basketball fan and she's like incredibly busy with work, so she didn't read 100% of it, but she read much of it. And I talked to some friends about it. And another thing I did, which is kind of random, I asked my followers, does anybody want to read a draft and give me feedback? And a lot of people said yes. I got about 10 people who gave me very useful feedback. But it's very important for a writer to get feedback because you just don't know how things are going to be received. And, one of my tweets, I was tweeting on the value of coaches in the NBA, and I still have a chapter on the value of coaches. And I had a chart that I thought was very beautiful where coaches are very, very valuable. And I had that Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, was more valuable than LeBron James, the famous player now of the Los Angeles Lakers. And I tweeted this out. It was like, no big deal. It got very little attention. Then someone retweeted it like 3 hours in. And he's like, idiot. He's basically called me an idiot for thinking this. And then it just started. It was on the path to complete virality, not in a good way. Just like, Seth is an idiot. How could someone think this? And basically everyone was like, there's no way that, Steve Kerr, a coach, is more valuable than LeBron James. And, it was heading towards, like, I just watching the views, it was like 2,000 views, 4,000 views, 8,000 views, 16,000 views. It was like heading towards, like, I don't even know how many views, all with everyone agreeing I'm an idiot.
Wow.
So then I deleted the tweet and I just edited that. I took out that chart and I edited the chapter because I'm like, okay, well, now I learned that people really do not like that point. I toned it down. I'm like, they have a point that kind of doesn't pass the smell test. So I toned it down. So I think another use case of tweeting things is finding out how your ideas are going to be received. And particularly for me, I noticed that I kind of I have no problem saying things that are controversial. I go into controversial areas. And I think something about me, people just can hate. Like, sometimes they like me, but sometimes they just hate me. Like, I've gotten viral a few times for being an idiot. I went to these elite schools. I'm like, I look a little funny maybe. I don't know. Something about me, everyone's just like, I can go really viral for being an idiot. So I have to be very careful, that I don't say things that make me look like a total idiot. So I like that use case of learning on Twitter. Okay, that's going to make you look like an idiot. Take it out or adjust and, kind of get it. So feedback's so important. In your own head, you kind of don't know how your ideas are going to be perceived. And then, there are some ideas where I just put things off as I'm just like, I'll put this graph up, but I'll probably cut it. And then I put it on Twitter and it goes like, it gets tons of views. People love it. People are like, this is so interesting. I'm like, oh, wow, I'll definitely keep that based on the feedback I'm getting. So it's very hard in your own head to know how your ideas are going to be perceived. And when you're self-publishing it, you don't have an editor. You don't have as many readers as you do for a published book. I think it's very important to, know how your ideas are going to be perceived. And you can use social media for that. If you have, I don't have a ton. I've never been that active on social media. I don't have a ton of followers, but I have about 16,000 or something. And it's enough that I've kind of been able to find, okay, that idea is not resonating with people. This idea is resonating with people.
Wow. Wow, and that leads to my last question on this segment of, discovering this side of the equation on AI and self-publishing. Seth, is, another use case that perhaps people in your position trying to self-publish by themselves or just embark on a crazy journey of writing a 30-day book is, trying to use ChatGPT or all these AI tools to give you that feedback. But that leads to my second part of the question, which is it might hallucinate or it might just confirm what you want to hear. So how did you thread the line? I know you write on it on Who Makes the MBA, and how did you thread the line in hallucinations? And you didn't use it for writing specifically, but how was this for you? How did you notice that these tools could be hallucinating, and will there be a chance to for them to give you precise feedback in the future?
Well, one thing with the hallucination point that I think a lot of people don't realize is hallucinations are a lot less common with GPT-4 than GPT-4 than GPT-3.5. So, and they're probably going to be much fewer with the next version if it's GPT-5. So the hallucination problem kind of, as the models get bigger and they use a lot more human feedback, reinforcement learning. The hallucination reduces a lot, but again, I don't recommend that someone just says, here, write this chapter with ChatGPT. Not just because of hallucination. I just don't think ChatGPT right now is a very good writer, it's not an excellent writer. It's a competent writer, but it's not a good enough writer that you'd want to just let it write your whole book or write even paragraphs or sections. The only thing I let ChatGPT write was my section on how to use ChatGPT, because I didn't feel like that had to be that was more that didn't have to be written that well, in my opinion. That was just kind of getting the facts down. I feel like the only people who are going to read it are people who are looking for technical information, and they're not looking to be entertained in that section. So I did a real rough draft of that, and then I just had ChatGPT write that out for me, and it did a great job of it. But it's boring, it's lame, it's not captivating in the way that I like to think some of my writing can be. So again, I'm not recommending that you just let ChatGPT do the writing for you. Copy editing is amazing, and feedback editing, it can be useful. It's very risk averse. I did a wedding speech, and for a friend of mine recently, and I asked ChatGPT for feedback, and pretty much everything I said, they're like, you might offend the bride by saying this, and the bride loved the speech, and she's like, because I'm always a little bit sarcastic and edgy or whatever, and I didn't run into any problems. I ran it by some friends. They're all like, this is fine. So ChatGPT, very risk averse, very cautious, careful, politically correct, and so that's if you're asking for editing advice, it's going to say things like that, and I don't know. It's going to be it's kind of going to tone you down to a very basic high school student A essay or something like that, or 8th grade A essay. It's going to try to get you to that level. It's not really going to get you to the level that I think anyone writing a book is trying to get to, a much higher level than that. And I think ChatGPT is kind of programmed to kind of push you towards the average, because it's based on averages. So it's kind of pushing you towards an average essay, an essay that's inoffensive, that doesn't push boundaries, that's not experimental, and that's I think dangerous for a writer. A writer should be daring to fail.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with that, I think it's a perfect way to get into the nitty-gritty of who makes the MBA. And Seth, I just want to say that it was really interesting because, for example, me as a 5'9", I just know that statistically speaking, I have no chance, even if I can. Well, Mugsy, because you also created a statistic, Mugsy's based on him. But I would love to hear your thoughts on, the chapter 1 is No Court for Short Men, and it's impressive. So can you walk us through how, who makes the MBA firstly, and how does the relationship between, height and these truths that we kind of all know about sports, but we don't want to accept, to just...
Yeah, so one thing that I have is, the relationship between height and probability of reaching the MBA, which again, I think everybody knows that you have an advantage if you're taller. You're 7 foot tall relative to 6 foot tall, let alone 5 foot tall, but the relationship, I couldn't believe, it's basically each inch you have doubles your chances of making the MBA throughout the height distribution. So if you're 6 feet tall, you have twice the chance of 5'11". If you're 6'1", twice the chance of 6 feet, all the way up as far as we can measure pretty much. 7 foot, twice the chance of 6'11". And what it means is if you're under 5'10", the average height of a male in the United States, you have a 1 in 3.8 million chance of making the NBA. If you're 7 foot or above, you have a 1 in 7 chance of making the NBA, which is kind of an enormous effect. I think a lot of people would find a chart like that depressing, because there is kind of this idea that you can do whatever you want is I think is considered a cheery view of life. I kind of view these charts a little bit differently. I found these charts kind of pleasurable to look at because I'm also, 5'9", on a good day, and, I dreamed of being a basketball player when I was a kid. And, a lot of times I beat myself up on all the things I didn't do. And I think it's nice to see that a lot of the things you dreamed of that you didn't accomplish were never in the cards. And, there's this great talk by Alain de Botton where he says the problem with our world right now is it used to be that, when in Britain, when the son of the king becomes king, everyone knows that if you're not son of the king, you have no chance of becoming a king. So it's not even in your, it's not something to aim for. And I think in contemporary society, when someone, Elon Musk was born to just kind of a fairly average family in South Africa, and Mark Zuckerberg had a background almost indistinguishable from mine, kind of an upper middle class Jewish family in the New York area. And I think there is this sense that, Barack Obama, just raised in Hawaii, a single mom. There is this sense that there's a feeling of you can do anything. And I think that's, I think people like that idea that, that as a society, you should be able to do anything. All options should be on the table, but it can make a lot of people feel bad about how their own lives turn out because, you're probably, almost certainly not going to become Elon Musk or Barack Obama or Mark Zuckerberg or Taylor Swift or, these are one in, 500 million outcomes, and they might be possible, but they're extremely unlikely. So it is kind of nice, if the theme of my book was you're almost certainly not going to become an NBA player unless your father was an NBA player, you're 7 foot tall, your brother's an NBA player. That might be refreshing for people whose athletic careers didn't maybe progress as far as they had hoped.
Absolutely. And for me personally, it was again, it gave me like this feeling of like cop out. Oh, you know what? I can stop blaming myself that much because I didn't choose to be 5'9", on a good day 5'10". But it's funny because you made me remember when I went to college, I went and tried out for the team, and it was an open walkout tryout for baseball, not for basketball. And so I get there and I think I'm the best player ever. I'm going to make the team. I can't believe I'm going to be in NCAA Division I just because of a walk-on. I'm going to be the next story, next big story. Then all of a sudden I get to the tryout, Seth, and I see a 6'4", massive 200-pounder guy, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to tell the coach I want to pitch, I want to bat, I want to play infield, outfield, I just want to do everything because I knew that was the end. And so we get to the pitching side of the equation, and the first guy pitches at 90 miles per hour, and he's again 6'5". He was skinnier, but then I go and I tell the coach, "Watch this! I'm gonna break all the records." And he has the pitching, the radar gun, and so I pitch with all my strength, all my soul, and I hit 69 miles per hour.
That's still impressive.
No, but I mean, you're seeing.
Yeah, but not 90, but 69 is good speed. But yeah, you're not going to be a major league player.
Ever. That's the first time I hear 69 is good. But then I tell the coach, if I hit 70, you sign me. You sign me right there. And they're like, okay, let's do it. And again, even more strength, even more like spirit, soul, I hit 68. So it didn't work. But like you say, this sheds a light on, the truth about sports, that it's a one in millions, and so it gives it just shares the truth that people don't want to see, that we want to keep our dreams open and with hope. And so that brings me to my next question, Seth, is that you say that the next LeBron is probably right now picking rice in India, and so that's a very, very cool graphic, that very cool image that you have on the book, which is literally LeBron picking rice. And so my question is, what does that mean for the system as a whole? Because we've discussed about opportunities, and everyone should have the opportunities. And what does that mean? Does that mean specifically for sports and for basketball?
Yeah, well, no, I don't even think it's even further. My guess is the best potential basketball player is probably doing something like picking rice in India, just because India is so much bigger than the United States. What are the odds that the most talented potential basketball player just happens to be born in the country where basketball was founded and has, the biggest league? It seems like pretty obvious that there are likely to be more great players in India or Indonesia or Bangladesh, China. And, if you look at, the rate at which people produce basketball players, there are very few regions of the world that produce basketball players in decent numbers, and there are huge regions of the world that are producing basically no basketball players. India's never had an NBA player, despite being one of the largest countries. And, a lot of that is stunted growth, that still there are enormous differences in average height around the world, and developing countries tend to have much lower average heights. I think in India it's 5'6", whereas in the United States it's 5'10". Netherlands it's 6 feet tall, and obviously because height is so important, if your average height is 4 inches shorter, you're getting a lot fewer 7-footers, 6'11" people, 6'10" people, 6'9" people. But there's also just interest in basketball, and if you're one of the things that's interesting about basketball is because height's so important and also very easy to spot. If you become 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet tall or above, it's actually kind of, you're going to probably try basketball. Your potential talent there is so obvious. So, there are all these stories of basketball players who didn't start playing the game until they were 15, 16, but they became 7 foot, they, grew to 7 feet tall, and they become Hall of Fame players. And, a shocking number of Hall of Fame centers didn't play the game until they were teenagers. But if you're 6 foot, 6'1", and you happen inside you have this potential to be a really fast dribbler, a clever dribbler, a really amazing shooter. You could be the next Steph Curry or Allen Iverson. It probably, the only way you're going to discover that potential talent is by playing lots of basketball. And if you grow up in India, a place where basketball isn't very popular, it's just that talent's never going to be found. And, the world's getting very good at finding the best centers around the world. So among people over 7 feet tall, more than 50% of players now come from outside the United States. But among people who are, less than 6 foot tall, it's about 8%. So, we're really not finding these potential talent around the world unless you have this very obvious height.
Wow. And does that mean that, is the NBA making itself a disservice while not perhaps trying to explore those countries, those nations? And also on the other note are those nations giving disservice to the people of not having those opportunities? Because perhaps in India they're not playing, like you say, as much basketball as here in the United States. But like how is this interfering in the in the human life equation of like someone being 7 foot tall and not understanding that he could be legacy for centuries if they play basketball?
Well, I think the 7-footers are able to figure that out. I think the bigger issue is the 6-footers, the 6'4" people who have the talent but aren't really, never discover their talent. And I think you can kind of just expand it beyond basketball. It's an interesting idea. Like, what talents are very, very obvious that, just seeing you is enough to see that talent's there. So a model would be an obvious example. So our world's probably very good at spotting the best models or the best actors and actresses because, if you're beautiful, it's very easy to see. But if a talent isn't, very obvious to the world, then the only way to really discover that talent is by trying it. And the only way to try it is if you're in a region, that encourages you to try that talent. And, I think there are all kinds of talents that we're missing. Probably the best people the best performers in that area aren't close to the best potential performers in that area because, the best people just don't know that they have this talent inside them. For a while, the best artists and poets were kids of wealthy people. And that's not because artistic talent, only was held by the children of the wealthy. It was because the children of the wealthy had the time to explore art, and some of them discovered, wow, I'm amazing at this. Whereas, a poor kid who had to work on his family farm would never notice that, secretly he had this talent of, Michelangelo or Mozart. So you think about just how much talent we've missed in the world. The NBA is just the start of all kinds of talent, and how frequently is the talent that we do find limited to a certain number of regions, where there's no reason to expect that the best impressionist artists happen to be born in Florence. That's I'm sure there are plenty of potentially great impressionist artists who are born somewhere else. So I think that it is interesting to think we're getting better at the world of finding the 7-foot men around the world. Wherever you grow up, whether it's Cameroon or Tanzania or Greece, you're 7 feet tall. We kind of are able to somebody finds you and gets a basketball in your hand, and with pretty good frequency you reach the NBA, sometimes become a Hall of Fame talent. But that's the exception. Centers in the NBA where we actually have spotted a lot of the talent. I think most of the world works a lot like guards in the NBA, where the only talent that's really found is in small pockets of the world where we put a lot of energy into finding the talent.
That's mind-blowing too, because that's, for me personally, one of the fears that I have is never realizing where do I have the biggest potential and how can I untap it. And then on the other hand, knowing that this is a macro scale focusing problem, not only in the NBA, but like you say, there's billions of people who might never know where their talent lies because we're not focusing on them. Like the people who might give them an opportunity to express that, and let's just say macro scale, governments or NGOs or any companies, private companies, anything, just even having a basketball court next to your house could be that tiny factor, and a lot of people missed out on those opportunities. And that's the nurture side of the equation, Seth, we could say. Now I'd like to get into the basketball genes, nurture versus nature. And I think that's a very revealing truth, again, one of those truths that we all kind of accept but don't really want to see straight into it. So how did, writing Who Makes the NBA influence your way into seeing this nurture versus nature equation and other factors? Who makes it to the NBA thanks to nurture and nature?
Yeah, so basketball is incredibly nature dependent, so genetic. And the way to see this is identical twins. So the NBA is dominated by identical twins in a way that basically no other sport is. And the reason for that is because identical twins, they share 100% of the genes, unlike fraternal twins or just normal brothers. So if one gets a really good genetic draw, the other one's going to get a really good genetic draw as well. And, I talk about there have been 11 pairs of twins in the NBA, and 10, probably all 11, at least 10, probably all 11 have been identical twins, which is mind-blowing dominance of identical twins. I kind of calculate that more than 80% of basketball talent is genetic, a large part because of height, which is one of the more genetic traits there is, about 80% genetic. But other factors as well, vertical leap, very genetic, sprinting speed, things like hand size, arm length, really important. The NBA just relies very heavily on traits that are very genetic. And it's interesting, you could imagine a future world, you talk about not knowing your potential. NBA is more genetic than other things, but everything, artistic talent, musical talent, ability to lead. You could imagine we're getting better and better at finding what these actual genes are as we get bigger data sets. The Biobank UK data set is a very big data set where they're finding correlations between different genes and a variety of traits. And height is one we're getting really good at measuring. Sean Bradley, he's a former NBA player. He was 7'6" tall, 7'6" tall, and some scholars got a copy of his genome, and they found that he had 198 genetic markers that were predictors of positive height. So just like an off-the-charts number of tall person genes. That if he was measured at a very young age, they could have said, Sean Bradley, you might want to start practicing free throws right now because, start your passing, because you're going to be 7'6" tall. And maybe instead of just being an okay player, he would have been a Hall of Fame player if he had started earlier. And you could imagine the future, as we get better at measuring how genes correlate with various talents, you could imagine everybody goes through, here's where you have the most potential and the least potential. And then start practicing early in the areas where you are more genetically gifted. So yeah, that's something to think about. I think it's we kind of, the current method is so inefficient of learning your talents, and so many things are like an Indian boy who could be Steph Curry never picking up a basketball. There are so many things we've never even tried. I've no idea how good I would have been at cricket, or how good I would have been at architecture. I have some sense. Okay, my spatial reasoning's not so great, so probably architecture wouldn't have been that great, and there are just so many areas where we have no idea how good we would have been. And if you could get to a future where you measured people's potential based on their genome, maybe all of us would be a lot better at finding our potential talents.
Wow, and it makes me excited personally, like to know you have like a breakdown of my talents, but also trying to play devil's advocate for you is, even though nature rather does play. I've seen the graphs of who makes the NBA. It's literally like genetics is like this, and nature is this, and other factors is like this. And so I hear the concern that I would be thinking about on a macro scale is it fair for everyone to have that that breakdown, even though, let's say I'm a huge passionate of I want to play baseball, I want to be a pitcher, but literally my peak, genetically speaking, was 69 miles per hour as a pitcher, but I want to keep the dream alive. So is that fair for everyone? Like, would that level the playing field for everyone in every opportunity on one sense, and on the other, what would that do? I think this is a very deeper question, Seth, but what would I do with the whole notion of free will? So you say that we're improving in terms of finding out our strengths and weaknesses. So does that imply that in a way we're trying also, maybe an externality would be to just end the debate of free will?
Well, I was a philosophy major. I never really fully believed in free will. There's kind of an idea, if you knew every electron right now, it's hard. That's a little complicated because of quantum mechanics, and there's some randomness at the level of the universe. But there is a sense in which, if you knew everything right now, you could predict the future. So where does free will kind of fit in the equation? What does it even mean if we're all just, our brains are just which neurons happen to fire? What does it mean to have free will? So I do think there's, the more I think about it, I think there's a disservice we do to people by telling them they can do anything, because it does make people feel, bad about failing to do things. That, even when we talk about people who love baseball so much and they practice more harder than anybody and they reach the major leagues, they're, examples of, or basketball, they're examples of players who outworked everybody. They were almost certainly still starting from a really high level. So Kyrie Leonard is an example of a player whose just work ethic is off the charts, and he improved every year. And he was only a mid-major recruit, and he, each year he improved, and now he's one of the best players. And until he was one of the best players in the NBA, but still his genetics were off the charts. He has enormous hands. He's 6'6" or 6'7". He's quick. He took maybe the 1,000th best genetic draw of his cohort and turned himself into the best. But it's not like he took the millionth best genetic draw and turned himself into the best. So I think there is probably a value to, an honest assessment of the likelihood of achievement, and that it is significantly lower if you do not have, a great genetic draw. And for all, probably you're only going to feel, I think if you have, if you're 5'10", you're not particularly athletically gifted, telling someone that you can be an NBA player if you work hard enough, I think is only going to lead to sorrow.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, and it's really it's true. Honestly, it's true. Like if someone would really obsess themselves in being a great baseball player, but all of a sudden they get to a tryout and they see like there is no chance. They worked 20 years for that. I'm joking. I didn't do. I just thought that would be funny, but I agree with you, Seth, and that leads me to perhaps. I think we could begin to just land the conversation. I know there's so much to cover, but I have a few more questions, Seth, if that's okay with you. Is that another starking truth about NBA players who make it is their socioeconomic background, and why are some or a lot of players who've been NBA players named Chris? And so I know that when I was reading through your Twitter threads that you uploaded an image and asking for feedback because this might be a bit of controversy, had a lot of controversy in terms of the topics that you're speaking about. So can you walk us through why are so many people named Chris and the socioeconomic background of the NBA?
Yeah, so for a while there's an idea that if you're poorer, you actually have a higher chance of reaching the NBA. There's an idea that if you grew up kind of from a more disadvantaged background, that might be in an odd way an advantage because you'd have more drive. That if you grew up in the projects, your only chance of having a decent life is to become an NBA player. Whereas if you grow up, son of doctors, lawyers, you have so many other options that you're not going to practice all day, every day on your shot. And this has never been true. It's always, every study that's looked at this has found that, growing up from a more advantaged background is a positive predictor of reaching the NBA. I think it just shows how much the advantage of wealth and socioeconomics extends, that, even areas we've convinced ourselves it doesn't matter, it still matters in. So I think, it's hard to even think of an area where positive socioeconomics is not, a positive predictor of a good outcome, for all kinds of reasons. One of the things that I talk about in the book is, that non-cognitive skills are one of the areas where socioeconomics seems to have the biggest impact. So, if you grow up in a one-parent home in, the inner city, bad school, impoverished rural area, it's, one of the ways it shows up is lower, trust, lower social skills, lower discipline maybe. And, that's one of the things that kind of the wealthier parts of the United States and parents who are more well-connected put so much emphasis on in childhood is building these skills. How do you talk to other people? How do you interact with other people? And, if you look at the stories, I talk about Doug Wren in the book, there are all these NBA players who had amazing talent, but, they fought with coaches and they didn't follow team rules, and they ended up, just the talent went nowhere. I mean, you look back, they had a really tough background. And it kind of actually, when I was writing this, it made me more appreciative of the NBA players who did come from more underprivileged backgrounds. So LeBron James is an example. He grew up single mother, 16-year-old teenage mother, poor, Akron, Ohio. And, to go from that background to the best, maybe the second best NBA player in history is just incredible. And, every NBA player, I was just listening to an interview with Carmelo Anthony. They said, his discipline puts everybody else to shame. That, Carmelo's I thought I was a disciplined person, then I met LeBron. I mean, just off the charts discipline. So the Chris thing was actually interesting. There's actually a study from Steve Levitt and Roland Fryer where they found that you can predict someone's socioeconomics in the African American community, not as much in the Caucasian community, based on first names, and that African Americans from poorer backgrounds are more likely to have unique names. LeBron would be an example, but kind of names that nobody else is given. And then the players from higher socioeconomic status are more likely to have names like Chris or Michael or Paul or Marcus, James. And the NBA is just filled with players with common names. Black NBA players are half as likely as the population at large to have one of these unique names, which is just a dead giveaway that the socioeconomics are, we're talking about the black, upper middle class and rich, or middle class, upper middle class and rich, not poor people. And, they speak about not finding, not doing a good job of developing talent. It just shows, we know, it's kind of known, there have been studies that in poor communities, we're not finding the inventors, that people with the same math scores, if you grow up in a poor community, you're much less likely to have a patent to become an inventor. And everyone's like, okay, we kind of understand, we're losing all these potential Einsteins and, who just, grow up, in bad environments and their potential is never fulfilled. But we're also losing Michael Jordans in poorer communities, which I think surprises people more, because there was this notion that, that if anything, there are more poor than middle-class NBA players. So it just kind of shows how much talent is being missed by socioeconomics. Maybe if we had a universal income, or certainly more government spending on education and other things in these communities, we do a better job of finding talent.
Wow. That was a misconception that I had too about sports altogether, and it's clear that in basketball that plays a big role. And Seth, as we begin to wrap up, I know there's a lot to unpack still on how college influences your chances of getting drafted, how to play the draft game, survive the draft rather. And so I don't want to spoil the whole book to our readers who hopefully get to see the amazing work you've done. But I'm really interested in one of your last chapters, which is The Secret to Basketball. And what does that reveal about basketball as a whole, in extrapolated to sports, as a whole? What is the secret of basketball?
So the secret of basketball is the secret. Isaiah Thomas once told Bill Simmons, the secret of basketball is it's not about basketball, and which is kind of a mysterious statement. And what he meant is you have to get people to act for the team, not for the individual, because in basketball, Isaiah Thomas suggested, if you score a lot of points, if you take all the shots, we talk about a selfish basketball player, someone who takes a lot of shots, you're going to get paid more. And I actually did a study, how much do different statistics impact your salary, your social media fans. And it turns out the way to get paid is to score a lot of points, even if they're bad shots. So I think, kind of the NBA basketball has a bit of an incentives problem where, an individual could take a lot of bad shots. Kobe Bryant is one of the most legendary players of all time. There's a sense in which he didn't maximize the way he helped his team because, at the last second of a game, he'd always want to take the shot, be the hero. And, he only made a very small percent of those shots instead of passing it to someone else. But people forget the ones he missed and they just remember the ones he made. And everybody loved him. He made gazillion dollars from this. And I think it is incentives play a role everywhere, and people do respond to incentives. So if you get paid by, making the big shot rather than passing it to someone else and having them make it, just about everybody is going to take more shots. And, designing incentives that, can get people around, can get people to do, certainly in business, everyone's trying to get credit. What do you get credit for? People are going to do whatever gives you the most credit, right? Not necessarily what's best for the business. And so, yeah, it's definitely a more general phenomenon than just basketball. The secret of basketball, it's basically the secret of basketball is the power of incentives, and that, basketball does have an incentives problem that scoring gives too much benefit to the individual player, relative to passing.
Wow, and that in itself, while that incentive might help the individual player, that doesn't necessarily lead to more championships or more success for the team, right?
Exactly, and I say that probably one of the things the best coaches seem to do is to get people to overrule these incentives, to get people to pass more. If you look at, I kind of came up with a measure how often coaches get people to pass the ball, and that seems to be very correlated with how successful they are. So coaches can play a big role in, getting the players, particularly the star players, to pass the ball more than maybe is in their interest, as far as getting paid.
Wow. So Seth, I saw the the HBO Max series Winning Time this year, and I was very excited about basketball. And then last year, you might hate me after I say this, but last year I'm a Miami Heat fan, and I know that you're a Knicks fan, and so we can leave that for another conversation, because it was a really good conversation. And reading Who Makes the NBA and witnessing real time all of your progress that you've done, really like creating a new path for potential authors like me and for others, unleashing their creativity through these new tools. It's a very positive and optimist way of seeing how we could leverage them to be, powered by us and for us rather than for them. And, the pessimists with AI is another conversation, but I'm excited for your book, Who Makes the NBA, and I'm excited for all of your work, and I can't wait for to see this really launch and to have you again when you have your by at this pace by mid-year you're probably gonna have another 10 or 20 books, Seth. But anyways, I thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll host you again soon.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's a lot of fun.